In 2023, solar electricity became the cheapest energy source ever built by human beings. In 1977, a solar panel cost $76 per watt. Today, less than 20 cents. Here's why. Every time the world doubled its solar production, costs fell 20% automatically. China figured this out early, built at massive scale, and dragged prices down for the entire planet. Today, we look at how solar actually works, the mathematical law that made this price collapse inevitable, how China turned that law into a global revolution, and what the next breakthrough material could do. In 1939, a man named Theodore Wright was studying airplane manufacturing. He noticed something strange. Every time airplane production doubled, the cost of building each plane dropped by a predictable amount. Not randomly, not because of luck, by a reliable percentage every single time. Scientists now call this Wright's law, and it turns out it applies to almost everything humans manufacture at large scale. Computers, car batteries, LED lights, and it turns out solar panels. Here's how it works for solar. Every time the world doubled its total installed solar capacity, the cost of a solar panel dropped by about 20%. And here's the remarkable part. Solar capacity has doubled roughly every 3 years for the past 2 decades. So the price has been falling and falling and falling on a schedule as reliable as a clock. The result? In 1977, a single watt of solar panel capacity cost about $76. Today, it costs less than 20 cents. That is a reduction of more than 99.7% in less than 50 years. Wright's law is a mathematical pattern embedded in how manufacturing works. The more you make, the cheaper it gets. Compare that to fossil fuels, which don't follow this pattern at all. Oil prices go up and down based on wars, politics, and supply disruptions, things no engineer can predict or control. Solar gets cheaper every year, automatically, because humans keep getting better at making it. How a solar farm actually works. You already know from our last episode that the photovoltaic effect is what makes a solar panel work. Photons knock electrons loose from silicon atoms, and those flowing electrons become electricity. But a utility-scale solar farm, one that powers cities, not just houses, involves a lot more engineering than a panel on a rooftop. First, the panels don't just sit flat on the ground. Many modern solar farms use what are called single-axis trackers. These are motorized frames that very slowly rotate the panels throughout the day, following the sun as it crosses the sky, just like a sunflower turning its face towards the light. It sounds like a small detail, but single-axis trackers increase a farm's electricity output by about 25% compared to fixed panels. That is a quarter more energy from the same amount of land. Second, solar panels produce a type of electricity called DC, direct current. That means electrons flow in one direction, like water in a river, but the power grid that runs through your walls into your lights runs on AC, alternating current, where electrons reverse direction 60 times every second. They are two completely different kinds of electricity. To connect a solar farm to the grid, every installation needs a device called an inverter, a machine that converts DC electricity from the panels into AC electricity that can travel through the grid. Without it, a solar farm and the power grid cannot talk to each other at all. Why does the grid use AC in the first place? Because AC electricity can be stepped up to very high voltages using a transformer, which allows it to travel long distances with the very little energy lost to resistance. DC electricity can't be transformed this way easily. It loses too much energy on long journeys. This is why the entire world's electricity grids were built around AC, going back to Nikola Tesla in the 1880s. The duck curve problem. Here's where things get genuinely complicated. In California, where solar farms have been built at enormous scale, something strange started appearing in the data. In the middle of the day, solar farms produce enormous amounts of electricity, often more than people are using. More supply than demand means prices drop. On the sunniest days, electricity prices actually go negative. Grid operators are paying people to take electricity away because they have more than they can use and they can't just turn off the sun. But then, at around 5 in the afternoon, something shifts. People start coming home from school and work. Lights turn on, stoves warm up, air conditioners switch on. Demand surges fast. At exactly the same moment, the sun is going down and solar output is collapsing. The grid has to ramp up alternative power sources at enormous speed to fill the gap. Engineers noticed that if you drew this pattern on a graph, solar output and grid demand plotted together across a single day, the shapes look exactly like a duck. The belly droops at midday when solar floods the grid with too much power, then the neck curves up steeply in the evening when demand spikes and the solar disappears. They call it the duck curve, and it became one of the most talked about problems in modern energy and engineering. This is the central challenge of solar power at scale. Solar is extraordinarily cheap to produce, but it produces electricity when the sun decides, not when people need it. The evening energy gap can't be fixed by building more solar panels. In fact, more panels make the midday surplus even larger and the evening drop even steeper. Solving the duck curve requires something different, a way to store energy from midday and release it in the evening. We'll come back to exactly that challenge in episode 6. China currently manufactures approximately 80 to 85% of the world's solar panels. Not some of them, most of them. And it doesn't stop there. A solar panel isn't one product. It's the end result of 4 separate manufacturing steps. Raw silicon is purified into polysilicon. Polysilicon is sliced into wafers. Wafers are produced into cells, and cells are assembled into finished panels. China dominates all 4 steps. That means a country that builds its own factory panel still depends on China for the cells inside and the wafers inside those and the polysilicon before that. It isn't one dependency, it's a whole chain. The manufacturing dominance is a major reason prices fell as fast as they did. China invested heavily in building scale, enormous factories, specialized supply chains, which drove costs down faster than Wright's law alone would have predicted. The world benefited from cheap panels, but it also created a situation where most countries are now deeply dependent on one nation's supply chain for a technology they consider critical to their energy future. Some governments are now spending large sums of money to build domestic solar manufacturing, trying to reduce that dependence. Others argue the most important things is cheap panels for everyone, regardless of where they come from. The debate is ongoing, and it doesn't have an easy answer. The next generation, perovskite. Scientists are now developing a new material that could make solar panels even cheaper and more powerful, perovskite. Silicon panels have to be made at 1,500 degrees Celsius, a slow, expensive process. Perovskite could be printed at room temperature, like ink in paper. In the lab, perovskite silicon combined panels have already hit 33.7% of efficiency, higher than silicon alone could ever reach. The catch? Perovskite falls apart in rain and heat. A silicon panel lasts 25 to 30 years outdoors. Perovskite does not yet come close. Solving that is the central challenge in solar research right now. But here's the turning point. Solar is now so cheap that in many countries it costs less to build a brand new solar farm than to keep running on existing coal power plant that is already paid for and built. The old technology can't compete on price anymore, even against a brand new competitor. That is a turning point. The sun became the cheapest electricity source in human history. The question now is whether we can use it around the clock, and that is exactly what we will look at in episode 6. If Wright's law says every new technology gets cheaper as we make more of it, what other expensive technology do you think might follow the same path and become dramatically cheaper over the next 20 years? Tell us in the comments.